The waters around Philadelphia have so far not been utilised to their full potential, with development and infrastructure focused on land-based means, including the development of Few Haven Rail Yard for international freight exchange and the rail yard at Tinney Mine. So today we're going to add some history to the city through the creation of what was once Tinney's prime source of export, an old harbour waterfront. We'll take this average strip of land and add new businesses to help overcome the rising unemployment issues. Let's dive in. So to start today, we're actually going to dive straight into Google Earth, and here we are in Philadelphia, and on the Delaware River there are numerous places like this, where we have these old kind of harbour prongs, not sure what the technical term is for them, which have obviously become overgrown and dilapidated in a lot of places. So you can see that here. There's some of them that still remain kind of concrete texture, but very dirty. We can definitely do similar things like that with some decals in there. But there's numerous places like this along the river's edge. So if we come down a little bit further, for instance, we've got more in here. We've got more just down here where we've got these huge skyscrapers as well. We're not going to be doing that in this place near Tinney, but we have got, for example, a big car park here surrounded by trees and, you know, a little bit of kind of rock edge, which would go nicely with our waterfront texture. Down into the water, this you can see is all broken up here. I'm not entirely sure how we'd do that in CS, so we probably won't be doing something exactly like that. If we come even further down, actually, down to here, we've got things like this, where we have this Washington Avenue Green Park. So one of them is almost turned into this big park here with a pedestrian walkway, it looks like, going out into the water there, and a big statue at the end here. We can definitely do something similar with that, and you can see the park actually flows, this pathway flows into the back of some of these industrial units, which again, we want to take some inspiration from some of these. Like we've got some plain simple ones with just car parks and open concrete around them. And then we've got other ones which are more dusty, which we'll come back to in just a second. But yeah, this path flows just along the riverfront with really nothing like too particular, I suppose, to look at here. And then just joins up with the road at this point, where we go into some of these big box retail shopping centres, Walmart down there. So I think there's a lot of inspiration we can take from this. If we head back on over to this kind of section roundabout here, you can see we've also got this raised highway, which fits in quite nicely with our area. And then we have some more of these sort of more patchy, much more surface-led industrial areas where we've got little bits of overgrowth in the middle. Some containers, some random bits and bobs like iron bars and things like that lying around. We've also got quite a few of these kind of concrete dividers in the middle, it looks like, from this dodgy Google Earth graphic at least. So I think there's quite a lot that we can do with this, having some sections like this which is more industrial, almost warehouse yard style, and then some like the earlier area that we saw which is car park based. And we can definitely do a lot with these peninsulas. Now this is the other one that I want to point out in particular, because you can see there is an old rail line going across here, which I find absolutely fascinating. It's obviously broken down in the middle. I'm assuming that used to be joined. But I think, again, there's something we could do with this, making a rail line all really overgrown with some trees in amongst it. Graffiti on the end of it there as well, which we like, but really, really interesting there. And the rail line just doesn't go into anything. You can see it kind of joining back up, I guess, with the land here where the rails have actually disintegrated, but it doesn't seem to go anywhere from what I can tell, at least from Google Earth here. And I think the other thing that makes this really suitable for this area of Philadelphia is the fact that we have the big coal mine, obviously, at the back of Tinney over there. And this is kind of the closest waterfront area to it. So you can imagine back in the day when, if we're imagining that Tinney wasn't just developed very recently, there was the coal mine and it would send truck traffic down to a harbour out here to export it into the wider region and across out onto the water. So I'm thinking like here would have been a suitable place for a harbour once upon a time. And then obviously for Philadelphia, the infrastructure has grown over time and other harbours will develop in other places as time goes on. But this also then gives a reason for us to have some, you know, the sort of more older style of row housing in here as well, mixed in with that modern development, obviously, where they've redeveloped certain areas of it. I think it kind of will bring it together quite nicely and give it a purpose for this area of Tinney to exist around the waterfront. So hopefully that gives you a bit of context as to what we're actually going to be doing here today, but let's actually do some building, shall we? So we're going to start by getting a relatively small brush size here, and we're just going to focus on this strip of waterfront for the time being. So what we're going to do is we're just going to drag out this surface and level it to the ground here, and bring out these sections of raised kind of old harbour area to signify where those harbour points would have once been. So I'm thinking something like that. We don't need to bring it out too much further, but it doesn't intrude on the water too much. I think it still allows valuable space around it. So I think this is what we want to do here. And I'm going to do a few of different sort of lengths and sizes and that sort of thing to signify different uses, and it'll also make our waterfront a little bit more dynamic, I think, in the long run, having slightly different sizes so it's not all perfect and uniform. And I do realise we could do this with roads to make them perfectly straight, but I'm actually quite content to not have them that, because I think if they're meant to be run down and old, then actually over time, you know, some of the images we saw on Google Earth there, they're definitely not perfectly straight all the way along. And I'm very much hoping one day we will get keys in this game, which we could definitely come along here and spruce up some of these points and make them actually keyed around the edge of the overgrowth and trees and whatnot we're going to put in here. So I think that'll be an interesting point of redevelopment, at least when that comes to it. Hopefully, if it does come to it, we shall see. So I think that'll do. And just like a quick tip for this as well, you can see there's that cliff texture surface all over the prongs at the moment. So if we just level it out again, it will drag down that grass level. So I'm just right clicking on our grass surface there and dragging it down into the peninsulas, and yeah, that sort of fixes it from that point of view. Obviously some of these will have as concrete, they're not all just going to be trees, but we want to designate some different purposes for them. So I think this one can definitely be the park area, and I'm thinking a statue like this would go quite well from what we just saw on Google Earth. So I'm just going to place this in so that we remember this is indeed the park peninsula. So we'll leave that like that. I'm thinking this one as well could potentially be the railroad peninsula. I definitely want to do that. And we're going to go for Tegan's unelectrified railway line for this, because it's going to make it a lot more realistic. We don't want those power lines kind of going over it, I suppose. We're going to force it into elevated. I'm also going to put it on smooth slope just in case. I mean, we are on flat land here, so it should be okay. And we're going to draw in some bridges. Now, I'm actually going to turn off snapping for this. I'm going to put one section right in the middle here. And then I'm going to put another section, and I'm actually not going to snap it perfectly to 180-degree angles, because the reason for this is I really want those pillars in there, and I know we could go ahead and do that. But if we snap to perfectly 180, it's going to basically join up the segment when we're doing this close, which makes it kind of annoying. So yeah, I'm just going to go to 179 either way, and then we get in a few more pillars here, so it'll just make it easier in the long run. And we can have a bit of a gap for sure, and then we'll carry on this way just a little bit. And all of this is going to kind of be hidden by the trees, as we saw on Google Earth, which I think is going to be pretty awesome, actually. I'm quite excited to see how this comes out. So I'm thinking we even just leave it like that, and I am wondering if we could potentially just lower down this node here a little bit. I mean, the pillar's gone, so that it's almost kind of broken down a tiny bit, potentially. And if we grab a better bulldozer, we can actually remove these sub-elements as well, which kind of helps. We can't, unfortunately, remove the fence, which I find really irritating. So I'm wondering if just this tiny little end piece, we actually turn it into that. So yeah, that does look really weird, but if we go to find it and we search for pillars, we can use some of our horizontal pillars here to play with the terrain a little bit. So if we place this in, let's just use this one by way of example, and we push this down, we can get this down to kind of the rough level that we want it to be, so that the ground is going to be nicely formed either side at least. And we can push it in like that, so it's almost like a loading bay, and then that's going to reduce some of the terrain around that end of the rail line. Now we could just grab this node here as well and move it up a little bit closer, so we've got less of that brick wall here. And then yeah, we can use the train pillars, and it can act as sort of a loading dock, I suppose, in the middle of these two lines. So something along these lines. So yeah, I'm going to do a quick little time lapse to tidy this up in a second. But that is what I was thinking for this. And we could also do a similar thing on this end, I think, just so we get rid of some of that fencing. And then we'd also be able to get walls that we can have some graffiti on and that sort of thing. So I know this looks like a complete disaster, but bear with me, quick time lapse, and hopefully this will be fixed up to something much more similar at least to what we saw on Google Earth. Okay, hopefully that looks a little bit better now. I had a bit of an ordeal trying to get the graffiti onto this wall. I had to place a prop building in, put it on that, and then delete the prop building to get it in, but we have got some in at least. It's not round the curvy end, but there we go. And the other annoying thing is I cannot find any decals or surfaces which will stick to our railway pillars, so it looks like really stark concrete now. I'm going to work on that a little bit. I'll see what I can do in the detailing time-lapse or what I come up with potentially after that if I can't find a solution, but for now it's okay. We have got the rubble down here where the train line is a bit broken down supposedly. I mean, it's not perfect, but I think it symbolises what we wanted to at least. And then we got these old Real Vision decals in the middle here to symbolise where some of that harbour would have been at some point, more of that concrete surface at least. So yeah, that gives us our little broken down railway line at least. And so obviously we're going to have the park over here, which we'll come back to in the detailing time lapse. This one I think we're just going to fill with trees, so again we can do that in the detailing time lapse, but we'll just add a few on there for now, so that can just be the overgrown tree lined one. And then I think down here what we're going to do is have one which is a car park and one which is a solid concrete base. So I think we'll use a alleyway road with parking for this, just to simplify it, to be honest. And we can draw this in, and this fits quite nicely actually on this peninsula. With a little bit of luck here, we can just draw this straight into here, and we'll connect that into the road system in a second. And then we can do some trees around the edges, which is like the parking peninsula we saw in Google Earth around Philadelphia. Let's just extend that a little bit right to the end there. Now the parking, what's it actually going to be for? Is going to be for some industrial units around here. So definitely on this side, we want to fill that out with industry, and then have some larger units with some yards, I think, on this side as well. But just before we go on to do that, a quick word from today's video sponsor, which is Instant Gaming. If you're perhaps looking to pick up the Modern Architecture or Urban Promenades Content Creator Packs, or even the base game of Cities Skylines II, in fact any game of your choice including Farming Simulator, Civilization 7, the whole Sims shebang, Planet Zoo and all of its corresponding DLCs, please do use my link in the description of this video to go and see what amazing deals can be had on this massive variety of games. And we also have a monthly giveaway, which is again linked in the description below, where you can win a game of your choice. So go and bag yourself a deal, check out the link, and also help to support the channel. So just before we place down some buildings, looking at demands here, we do have slightly higher demand for office than industry. So I'd like to mix in a few different offices with some industry buildings into here, and there is one office in particular that I think would go quite nicely, which is this local office building, which happens to fit into this space really well as well. So yeah, really nice little office asset, and I think we can definitely add to it. I mean, we've got these entrances on the sides, and I think there's a bit of a gap in the back which we can definitely fix with a bit of detailing to keep that hedge going in, but we can add in a car park or some service areas I think for this. So I think what we'll actually use is one of the invisible roads with some parking alongside it and just connect it in here. Now if we turn off snapping, in fact we're not going to do that because it's going to connect into our slip road, which would be a bit of a disaster with cars driving through the wall there. So let's not do that. Let's go and find a parking lot. We could just put in a simple one like this. And if we pull it back as far as we can go, we could then add in some of Dome's car parks just alongside it here to fill out this gap. And then we can extend the surface out to the road here where it's just snapped back a little bit. So that just gives us a couple of extra car parking spaces on the side of the office building here. If we move that right up next to it, then that's going to get rid of that little green border. I think out this way as well, we'll also probably extend this surface round to meet the road, so it looks like we've actually got some kind of pathway in this side, and we could even put in an invisible pedestrian path. We don't have any connectors into the building there actually, so it doesn't really make sense to, but we can symbolise that through this little side entrance here anyway. And then we'll probably just fill this part with trees because the landscape here is quite slopey. So that gives us one, and this is this is the annoying thing, but if we use an invisible road here, we're still going to have the issue of them trying to get onto the slip road, so we'll leave it like that. And then next to that, I'd also like to put in a car lot. So I think for that, we'd quite like a simple industrial building such as this. This will be perfect. Nice and small, hopefully won't get any smokestacks on it at this kind of level. And if we just push that back a little bit further so it's closer up and utilising a lot of that space, we still need it to connect it to the road though. So as far as we can go without that, without the connections breaking, well, that'll do. And then what we can do is fill out this area with a lot. So if we come into Better Bulldozer, we'll remove this fencing from here. We'll extend out this surface. And we could re-put some fencing in around it to mark off the area, and a load of car props is what I'm thinking for this. So we can have them all lined up like so, as if it is a car showroom. So we'll leave a little bit of a gap in between them. We could even do some muscle cars in here as well. So roughly along those lines, and we'll finish that off in the detailing time-lapse. But the reason why I thought this would be nice is that Jay Stokes actually pointed out that because we've got the muscle car garage, we've got the biker bar, we've also got this scrapyard now over here with a few cars in it as well, we could make this quite an auto area, and I really like the idea of that. And I also think a road like this, kind of fitting into awkward space amongst an old disused harbour now, is the perfect place for something like a car lot. So yeah, we can transform this with a bit of a lot of detailing, shall we say. So we have got actually oh, interestingly, it is a vehicles company in here, the Grand Margay, so there we go. That works quite nicely. They probably won't stay for very long, but at least they're there for now. And then in here, I'd like to squeeze in just a few sort of smaller industrial units. So things that will fit into this space. Now we do have things like this where there is a smokestack potentially going to spawn, so I kind of want to avoid those buildings wherever possible, because I don't think this is the type of place that would have the big smokestacks for sure. I think it's more of a smaller local kind of industry type place, like this one actually with the big kind of glass double doors. Looks more like an office space on the side of a warehouse. That's actually perfect. So we can definitely use a few of those along here. This one's quite nice because it's tall as well, so adds a little bit of height along the highway. So we can definitely do that. I also want to be wary of sort of back entrance access into these, like here. We've obviously got this store yard at the back, so we're going to leave a bit of space between those buildings so that we can do some detailing into there to have vehicles come in that side. And this is generally the sort of thing that I try and think about quite a lot when I'm placing in a lot of these buildings. But something like that will do quite nicely. So we have got that office in there and then just a little bit of industry. And we've still got industry demand, actually, which is good to see. Now over this side, I think I'd quite like to have an office with a larger open car park, which spans up next to our tree peninsula, or what will be our tree peninsula. So let's just drop this in here for a second, and then I'm actually just going to shift it back a little bit so it's set back just a tiny bit further. And then we can give it its own entrance, which can run into the car parks as well. And if we join in the roads this end, we can add in domes car parking around here as well, just to extend that car park out. So we'll finish that off when it comes to the detailing, but that can be its own little complex. And then the rest of this area, what I would like to do, and what the car park is here for, is essentially turn it into, well, obviously an old historic harbour that's now been turned into more of a commercial marina. However, I'm not going to be putting boats in here. I know there are some boat props available, but I'm kind of hoping that bridges and ports may give us something that will jazz up this area in the long run. But what I would like to do for the moment is set it up like a big kind of open concrete space where we can imagine that boats would dock. We've got the car park there for commercial people to come in and park so they can use the marina, or the docking as it were. And then I'd also like a couple of industrial buildings to suit this area too. So let's create a junction out of here, and the snapping is kind of making it go a little bit funky, so let's bring it out at this point here, and then we'll bring this across here. Now I want this to kind of go as close to the end of this particular peninsula, and you'll see why in just a second. And then we can join it up into the car park here, so we can turn snapping back on for this so we get in a nice straight angle. And then I think we'll also add in another entrance at this point so that people can more easily get to the car park. Now over here, what I'd like is one industry building that's going to look like a sort of boat maintenance yard, hopefully, something along those lines at least. So I'm thinking perhaps this one would be quite good. We've got those two kind of garage entrances. We can sort out the fencing and the props and things around it and make that a little bit more suitable for the purposes that we want here. We could add that in there, and that's still connected to the road. Wonderful. And then down this way, I'm thinking maybe a smaller warehouse of some description may be quite suitable for here too. Something like that is not too bad. So again, we'll have it face out towards the water at this point here. And that can sit in there. Yeah, that's fine. And then I'd quite like a commercial unit in here to signify maybe some kind of like cafe or something like that. So let's see if we can find the perfect asset. So I actually quite like this Japanese commercial asset for our little, well, we'll call it a clubhouse. We can jazz it up with some different surfaces. We'll definitely put some outside seating in here as well. Have a little like kind of outside bar area around our clubhouse. I think that sits in quite nicely. We might want to change some of the colours on this though. I'm not sure the olive green necessarily goes with the bright blue roof. So let's make that white. And then the blue, perhaps we'll go just a tiny bit darker. I mean, it's a marina of some description anyway, so a little bit of blue here I don't think will hurt too badly. So yeah, I think that'll be okay. And then I am wondering, can we squeeze in like an absolutely tiny office in here too, to kind of signify again, sort of almost like a security entrance or an office for the actual boatyard? And that's even not the first one I've clicked on. Actually not too bad here. So yeah, we could have this in here as well. So let's do that. We'll shift the clubhouse over slightly so we've got a little bit more space for that outside seating. And then this can be open yard area where all of our boats are going to go. So for this section, what I do want to do here is something a little bit different. We're actually going to get an alleyway road and we're going to snap it into our little section of straight road here, getting some nice 90-degree angles on it to create our key kind of area. Now, I'm not going to use the actual quay wall for this because I really, as I've said before, do not like the fact that it's got a fence on it. It's just not realistic for some kind of marina harbour to me. So we're actually going to go for the retaining wall option all the way around. And now obviously there's a similar issue to what we had on the rail lines here, where the terrain is just going to sit up against it. So we're going to go in and use our horizontal pillars. And if we go to Advanced Line Tool now in the wall-to-wall mode, these will go in end to end. So we can line these up with our retaining wall here, try and get it as close as we can to that actual retaining wall. Like this. And we're going to move it. We'll select all of those pillars, snap, and make sure that they are the same height with Control H. Then we're just going to drag it down next to that retaining wall. And what that leaves us with is the nice kind of quayside. I don't really mind the tiny lip on this so much. I feel like that's okay. And we're going to fill the rest of this with a concrete surface that we can add some nice decals to. And that sort of thing. And actually, quick note as well, because halfway through this episode, El Glendo released a, newish pack. It was the first time I saw it on Paradox Mods for moss and rust and dirt and things like that, which all snap to props. So if I come back over here, I can show you. These actually snap to the top of our railway pillars really, really nicely. So we can come back through here and do some extra dirtying up of these little concrete bits within our railway yard here. And of course we could have done the same here. We could have lined this all with the railway pillars and then used some of these decals on it. But this is quite a large space to do that with, and I want it to be relatively open concrete. So not really any trees to hide things underneath, shall we say. So yeah, this is the option that we're going to go for instead here. We'll get rid of some of those street lights and tidy it up, but that is the general premise of it. So we'll do those horizontal pillars all the way around. And then down here, we're probably going to have to convert some of this to a key wall, or using the same retaining wall technique here too, which won't be a problem. So yeah, that's kind of the framing of our little marina harbour type area that's still sort of functional, but a bit more run down from what it used to be. And just in terms of longer term plans, this space here, I was thinking we could kind of add it into the effect of this old harbour, but have it actually be another functional, what I'm calling a ferry terminal, to take people from Fewhaven out to here, because we're going to have quite a big population in here once it's all built up. So I think that'll be quite nice. And then we'll probably have another ferry connection, cruise connection, whatever you want to call it, in the downtown space as well, which is what I will eventually hook up to the outside connections there too. So I think with that in as well, it'll bring the whole area together pretty nicely indeed. So just before we come on to detailing, I want to give a big shout out to last month's challenge winner, which was Peter Oldham, with this amazing, moody, rainy shot of his city in Cities Skylines II. Awesome work, some great entries this month. If you want to get involved in our community challenges and be up for a chance of winning a game of your choice, courtesy of me, then head on over to the Discord to find out all the rules and how to enter. But congrats, Peter, awesome shot. Okay, let's crack on with the detailing. So what was quite a small little waterfront area ended up taking absolutely ages. I got a little bit stuck into it with the surfaces, as you probably saw from that time lapse. But here we go. So we'll start off down this end. Now I've obviously left this open to whatever we're going to put here. I think I mentioned earlier in the episode potentially a harbour to connect Few Haven up to this area. So yep, that will come at some point. So we do have our little park down here. Quite similar to what we saw on Google Earth, a statue with a couple of benches around it, this little circle section at the end, and then a walkway for pedestrians to come out, and probably, I'm going to guess, look at the cruise ships will be ultimately what it is by the end of this. Maybe we'll even redevelop this park into something more functional as time goes on, but we shall see. Nice and simple. Little dirt track leading out to a little dirt car park here too. I've just put in a couple of prop cars, but there are invisible parking spaces along the dirt edges here. So I thought that was quite a nice way to fit that in. And then we come on to our two office buildings. So I haven't done much to this one over here. Those car parking spaces are still disappearing. So yeah, I'll keep moving them around until they come back. And then they'll disappear again, but never mind. And then we have Peehee over here. Our office. I really like that big vibrant sign, so yeah, I think it's looking pretty cool here. And I've just transferred this car park, so actually with the alleyway parking lot roads, you could still see the car parking spaces through the surfaces when I covered it up with concrete, which I didn't quite like and wasn't like the area that I was using on Google Earth for inspiration. So I changed it into invisible parking lots and then added in a few prop cars in a few different places just to make sure it was busy enough that we had some activity in here. But I quite like the fact it's all empty and patchy, and I think it's looking generally quite cool. And then of course we've just got our tree peninsula behind it, so it's like this office has taken over old industrial space here but not bothered with the peninsula because it doesn't need it, frankly. So I think that sits in quite nicely. And then we come on to our makeshift sort of marina area. And we've used loads of Alglendo's lovely new decals around this building to add some rust and worn effects to it. And then again, this patchy concrete effect all the way around. Really loving the Real Vision decals actually on the edge to give us that little kind of grass border. And at first I wasn't really too sure because it was looking very patchy with like this dark patch in the middle. But actually I think it works quite well. I mean, definitely when you zoom out on the bigger picture, it feels somewhat realistic as well. I'm kind of enjoying the patchy concrete look at the moment. Did add in a couple of extra rusty containers over here, making use of the fact we can snap those to our props, which is awesome. Again, we got a couple of prop cars and we have got some invisible car parking spaces around here too. And then coming out to the peninsula, which has turned out pretty nicely, I think, here. And then we come down to our little clubhouse where we've just added the usual things to make this seem like it is a sort of a bar or a members clubhouse at least. I'm noticing some of these decals keep disappearing under the road, which is a bit annoying here. But never mind. Then we've got our big empty car park. Yeah, hopefully we'll actually get some boat props eventually and we can fill out this area a little bit more. But I'm actually quite liking the sort of empty look of it at the moment. It feels like an old space that's been taken over at least. And then we've just got little spots of details as we move up through our industrial buildings up here. So some dirty decals, stains and things on the actual buildings themselves, various different props around, lots of trash in this end one over here. Different surface colours as well, which I thought worked quite nicely. And then we come down to our car lot here. So Cities Cars Customs, of course. Got a big sign over the motorway over here. Oh, I've just noticed that surface. Yeah, I need to fix that. I put some of Gaga XM's lovely stone surfaces over the grass areas around here, but it seems to be spilling out onto the road above, which is quite interesting. So I will fix that. That will be gone. We'll have our road back as normal without stones all over it. But yeah, I did put in this little billboard up next to the freeway over here, to the highway, which I think works quite well. And then a few more cars and that sort of thing. Did add in these barriers as well so people can't just drive the cars out of the lot, but I thought this worked quite well. I kind of want those little for sale signs on all of the windscreens to, you know, say $3,000 or however much the price of the car is. I think that would be a nice effect to it, but for now, it works pretty well. So yeah, small little build today. Actually, it's a reasonably sized area, but hopefully quite nice and detailed. And I think it adds a really nice perspective to our waterfront here too. And I think as we build up into more functional waterfront as we head on down this way, it's going to be a nice blend into it of the old area that's more disused now into a functional industrial waterfront. So for today, that is going to be it. If you have enjoyed the episode, likes, comments and shares are really greatly appreciated. Huge shout out to all of my Patreons and members. You guys are amazing. The Funiverse is growing. If you want to come and join us, there's links in the description below. But that is all from me for now, so thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you again next time. Bye bye.